Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather on the first day of July 2022. I'm David Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, fire weather graphic showing extreme fire danger again, central interior areas and east central interior, especially up over the Yukon Flats area and then down into around Fairbanks and into the northern Kuskokwim Valley. Very high fire danger farther to the west there into the central Kuskokwim Valley, but high fire danger on the decrease there toward Iliamna Lake with rainfall moving into the area there, as well as the southern Kenai Peninsula. Rain into Seldovia by early afternoon today, about 2/100 of an inch having fallen there, and high to very high fire danger over the western Kenai Peninsula up into Anchorage in the Susitna Valley. And it looks like the far east-western end of the Matanuska Valley has high fire danger, and then low off to the east, covering all the Copper River Basin, low fire danger there. And kind of an expanding area of high fire danger up over the North Slope with some very high fire danger showing up there. It looks like it's not too far from Umiat Airfield. Same thing there for Selwyn Valley, Kobuk Valley areas, and the Nalato Hills have some very high fire danger in that area as well. Otherwise, satellite imagery showing active front moving into the southwest coast, pushing rain into the southwest coast with gusty winds, and that's sliding up into Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island. Fair amount of rain over Bristol Bay, soaking rains in the last 24 hours in some areas down that way, like King Salmon. Otherwise, low clouds and fog pretty extensive along the southeast coast early on, but that burning off over some areas this afternoon for mostly sunny skies there and temperatures warming into the 70s. Copper River Basin sunshine. Cook Inlet kind of an increasing cloud condition this afternoon during the day, midday hours as cumulus build and stream off to the northwest, and that southeasterly wind flow aloft in advance of that frontal system pushing the smoke back to the areas west, northwest, and north of the Alaska Range where it belongs, and actually blowing it away from the mountains there. So visibility is early afternoon, not all that bad in the interior there. Some lower areas, but that smoke extending all the way up to Arctic Village, where I think they're running 2 to 3 miles in smoke there. And you can see a lot of clear skies over the North Slope and good portion of the Arctic coast as well into the Arctic Ocean. You can see the sea ice there. It's so clear, but the Bering Sea, lots of cloudiness out that way. And rolling this through to the infrared, you can see the delineated frontal boundary there, the higher, colder top clouds pushing into the southwest coast. Actually, the back edge of the front still just off the coastline there. New low developing, pushing eastward, pushing that portion across Kodiak Island, and then some bands of clouds and moisture with troughs and increase in shower activity there coming into western Bristol Bay from the Pribilof south towards Nikolsky, and then another system back out over the western Bering and the Aleutians. Otherwise, another day much like what we've seen over the interior. Smoke, some developing thunderstorm activity. First, you can see over there in the northwest, in the Yukon, already going pretty good there, and that beginning to increase over the eastern mountains, or the eastern Alaska Range, and we'll see an increase in that over the interior over the next couple of days. This is visibilities at early afternoon, 5 miles in smoke and haze reported at Fairbanks, but Eielson Air Force Base around North Pole, 10-mile visibility there. And Nikolai up to 10 miles now, but McGrath still down to around 3 miles. And then Tanana, 1.5 miles, one of the lower areas there, have one of the lower visibilities there, 1.5 miles in smoke, but not too bad, and actually a little better than what it's been over the last few days in some areas there. And as far as precipitation goes, you can see some significant rainfall amounts on the upslope area of the Alaska Peninsula there, over 2¼ inches falling. And let's see, that's Pilot Point picked up just under 1/2 inch, and Let's see, king salmon, 2/3, almost 7/10 of an inch of precipitation there, and anywhere from a quarter to nearly half an inch north coast of the Bristol Bay area, with a third of an inch falling at Togiak. Cape Newnham picking up 3/4 of an inch of rain, and farther to the north you can see some significant amounts there, anywhere from 4 to 6/10 in some areas, but out over the Kuskokwim Delta much lighter. Bethel picking up just under 1/10 of an inch, and then just a few hundredths of an inch elsewhere, and up around St. Mary's about 1/10 of an inch there. Otherwise, rain pushing into southern Cook Inlet as well. Seldovia has now picked up a few hundredths of an inch, but you can see heavier amounts on the south coast of the Seward Peninsula, about 7/10 falling there in the normally wetter area, upslope mountainous terrain there. Seward picking up 2/100 of an inch as well. Next frame here showing the peak wind gusts. So that's a pretty active frontal system there with as far as rain and wind goes. 53-mile-an-hour peak wind gust at Cape Newnham. Also inlet areas of the Yukon Delta, 53-mile-an-hour wind gusts there. Hooper Bay, 44 miles an hour. Tooksuk Bay had 47 miles an hour. And anywhere from 20 to 35 miles an hour in over the southwest interior to the western Alaska Range areas. Augustine Island about 28 miles an hour. And moving on farther here, today's showing that front pushing up toward the southwest coast, bringing the gusty winds and kind of a widespread area of rain from St. Lawrence Island southwest eastward there across the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, moving into Kodiak Island. And otherwise the interior got showing isolated thunderstorms starting to develop with the areas of smoke again, mostly sunny skies, and pretty mild temperatures rising well into the 70s from the Susitna Valley northward into the interior. Dry over the Panhandle with, after the morning low cloud and fog condition burns off, kind of lingering along the coast a little longer there. And another system out over the western Bering Sea tonight develops into a frontal boundary. That pushes eastward, bringing some rain, not quite to Adak, but staying west of the Pribilofs there. And that front weakening along the southwest coast there as it pushes inland, but that'll keep periods of light rain going from these Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, down across the southwest coast and interior areas, maybe in the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Looks like some rain, southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, Anchor Point southward actually for Kachemak Bay and the southern Kenai Peninsula areas, Homer, Seldovia. Rain for Kodiak, a little breezy conditions there, but not too bad as that low weakens to the south, maybe 25 miles an hour, and that's about it. Low clouds and fog possible areas of the Arctic coast, and an area of lingering thunderstorm activity along that trough up over the interior. From the western Arctic coast, east-southeast right into the upper Tanana Valley down to the eastern Alaska Range, northward to around Eagle or so. And for Saturday, got the remnants of that front weakening, so rainfall amounts will be lighter and more intermittent and showery there for the southwest part of the state, but kind of a widespread area of cloudy or cooler conditions, and into the lower Yukon River Valley and across the western Seward Peninsula, and then thunderstorms breaking out along that trough axis over the eastern interior, back to the northwest with some shower activity all the way out to the western Arctic coast. Rain, southern Kenai Peninsula, and that really cuts off. None of that really gets really from Kenai northward. It'll stay dry with areas of sunshine, low clouds and fog early on into Bristol Bay, and maybe Turnagain Arm burning off in the afternoon. Same sort of pattern for the Panhandle that you saw today. Early morning low clouds and fog giving way to sunshine by late morning through the afternoon. And Bering Sea now has a front way out there to the west, so conditions not too bad. Light winds, low clouds and fog for the eastern Bering Sea. And the outlook for Sunday, next system pushes eastward there, spreading rain into the Pribilof Islands, and we still have that boundary there along the southwest interior, keeping it unsettled and damp with cloudy, cooler conditions. And actually look for a significant increase in thunderstorm activity with more clouds and lightning across much of interior Alaska. But south of the south central Alaska, look for a little bit warmer temperatures on Sunday, up maybe 2 or 3 degrees over what they'll be tomorrow. Partly to mostly sunny skies. Still a chance of rain, southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, southern Kuskokwim Valley. Variably cloudy over the Panhandle, again low clouds and fog along the coast. And for lows tonight, 40s and 50s over the interior, mid-40s for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, as well as the North Slope and Arctic coast. Highs tomorrow, 85 to 90 over the eastern interior. You can see near 90 there in the Yukon Flats, about mid-80s or 85 for the Fairbanks area. And then 60s to mid 70s, south central Alaska, near 80 in the Copper River Basin. 65 to 75 for the Panhandle. Lows, upper 30s for the central Arctic coast, otherwise 40s and 50s, followed by highs in the 80s, eastern interior, and 65 to 75 elsewhere.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, some marginal VFR, central eastern Arctic coast, VFR, western Arctic coast, then a couple of swaths of IFR over the Bering Sea, one pushing a fair distance inland into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, covering the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, down across all of Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, right up to the into southern Cook Inlet, especially Kamishak Bay, and along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Another band of IFR there from St. Matthew Island down across Adak westward to Kiska, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, and into the Bering Strait. IFR, including Nome over toward Golovin, VFR, Panhandle, and the interior. And for the afternoon, marginal VFR into the southern half of the Kuskokwim Valley, then northward there, northwest, crossing the Lotto Hills, Yukon River, and into Kotzebue, Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, Shishmaref, all marginal. IFR for Nome, Teller and Tin City, down across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, Kamishak Bay, south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, and at least a portion of Resurrection Bay in the IFR down toward Cairns Head, southern areas there. Marginal VFR northward, though, into possibly Girdwood eastward, into Whittier, Prince William Sound, to Cape Yakataga, Cape St. Elias, marginal VFR for the Panhandle, central and eastern interior. And no change really over interior Alaska on Sunday, especially the Arctic coast and inland areas of the central and eastern interior. Marginal VFR kind of creeping into the coast there for the Panhandle, but central eastern inside waters staying VFR. IFR there staying put over the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, and just south of Kachemak Bay into Resurrection Bay. IFR, marginal VFR now possibly from Portage into Whittier and Prince William Sound, otherwise VFR north of there. IFR, Bristol Bay, Togiak Bay into the southwest mountains, and a big area of IFR there just west of the Pribilofs, covering Adak, Atka, Shimei, and Attu to St. Matthew Island. And for the afternoon, IFR pulls off the Arctic coast, but leaving marginal VFR conditions behind. North slope southward into Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin, VFR, marginal VFR, Bristol Bay, southern Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area. Solid IFR, though, from the northwestern coast there, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, through the Bering Strait, down to Nunivak Island, Unimak Island, westward, all IFR. East of there, marginal VFR. VFR for the Panhandle. Anatuvik tomorrow, Saturday, VFR. Both Anatuvik and Adigan on either approach will be VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. Rainy, same forecast, VFR flying. Hold on to the voice. Windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, VFR. And for Tanita, VFR flying. Portage, marginal VFR, trending toward VFR flying. It will become VFR for Portage in the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, VFR. And for the freezing levels, 10,000 feet there over the eastern Bering Sea, all the way north to the Bering Strait and inland, basically 10,000 feet across all of mainland Alaska. The only place that won't be is out over the western Bering, 6,000 to 10,000 feet there. And for icing, considerable moderate rime icing with that frontal boundary just in advance of that, across Fognak Island, maybe northern Kodiak Island, in across the Barrens, and possibly to Seldovia into Kamishak Bay, with isolated moderate west of that in the frontal boundary, weakening frontal boundary, I should say, extending up into the Bering Strait. Otherwise icing free for the remainder of Alaska. Next batch just sliding into Shimei and Attu. Jet stream, about 70 knots out of the west, right over the central Aleutians, and it drops south of the forecast area, as it has been doing for the longest time, and a weaker branch south to north there in the northern Bering Sea. And at 9,000 feet, 35 to 40 knot southeast winds there coming across the Gulf into the southern Kenai Peninsula. and westerlies 35 knots in the central Aleutians, 3,000 feet. Westerlies 35 to 40 knots over the central western Aleutians, and a narrow band of 40 knot east-southeasterlies across the Barren Islands there into Kamishak Bay and the southern Kuskokwim Valley translates into moderate chop in that area, below surface 6,000 feet, with western Aleutians as well.
It used to be that you could only warn one person about a tornado after it had already blown down someone else's barn.
Now, on average, we're able to issue a tornado warning 15 minutes before the tornado's even there, and that wouldn't be happening without Doppler radar.
This NexRad system has reduced fatalities on the order of 45% due to tornadoes since its advent.
We have a lot more information now about storms and being able to understand how they develop, how they produce severe weather, and how that information might be used to improve warnings for our National Weather Service partners.
The lab is unique in that we serve the nation by supporting the National Weather Service in its mission to protect lives and safe property by improving the accuracy and the lead time of severe weather warnings.
We have a legacy of radar research and converting existing technology from military to weather purposes.
A recycled Doppler radar led to the development of NexRad, installed nationwide in the early 90s. It allowed forecasters to see storms like never before.
Not only did we help bring that technology to the National Weather Service and to help protect lives and property, but we have continued to upgrade that technology, keep it relevant, and keep it state-of-the-art.
Recently, a major upgrade was added. Dual polarization technology takes the radar from 2D to 3D. Forecasters now know more about what type of precipitation is falling, which is very helpful during winter storms, as well as how much rain is accumulating, resulting in better flash flood warnings. The radar can also detect and track tornadoes based on debris. Looking to the future, the National Severe Storms Lab is testing the capabilities of phased array radar. Originally used by the U.S. Navy, the antenna scans the skies electronically rather than mechanically, allowing the radar to focus on a storm.
With current technology, we get a full picture or image of what is going on within a storm every 4 to 5 minutes. So it's more like a snapshot. Whereas with phased array radar, we get that picture of what's going on in the storm every minute. So it becomes more like watching a movie. So we can do adaptive, rapid scanning on the storms that matter most, being able to provide the information that's most relevant when and where it's happening.
Another advantage of phased array radar is its multifunction capability, providing weather and air traffic information simultaneously.
Number one, it is a system that promises to replace and expand upon the existing weather surveillance radars. Secondly, to replace aging air traffic surveillance radars. And number three, it offers a potential application to meet Department of Homeland Security and defense requirements for identifying and tracking non-cooperative aircraft. With the replacement of all these various radars with a single system, the American taxpayer could realize substantial savings in cost.
You have a lot fewer radars to maintain, and the electronic capability of this also reduces maintenance costs because you do not have moving parts.
Not too long ago, the ability to predict severe weather was thought to be impossible. During the past several decades, research conducted at the National Severe Storms Lab has developed life-saving tools like Doppler radar. We've progressed from no warning of threatening weather to about a 15-minute lead time, and current research promises to extend that much further.
Our knowledge of severe storms and how they behave, and our use and ability to use the Doppler radar technology and is in a lot of cases a direct result of that close working relationship, that research to operations component that we get between the National Severe Storms Laboratory and a forecast office.
That history and understanding of how these data can be used by our users and doing the research to help advance the use of radar technology, really it's what we live for, it's in our lifeblood, it's in our history.
It's now easier than ever to be a part of weather research. We just launched the MPing app for both iPhone and Android users, and it's totally free. PING, which stands for Precipitation Identification Near the Ground, is a research project by the NOAA National Severe Storms Lab and the University of Oklahoma. With the mobile app, you can send us your weather observations on the go. Are snowflakes falling on your head? Is hail hitting your car? Just select what type of precipitation is falling and press submit. It's that easy. It takes about 5 seconds and it's anonymous. Reports can then be viewed online. Our scientists will compare your report with what the radar has detected. This helps us develop new radar technologies and techniques. Download the app today, share your reports, and let's work together to make our nation weather ready. Learn more here and follow us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast, starting on the south coast, northwest winds for Saturday at 15 knots, seas 5 feet. West-northwest breeze at 10 knots for the north coast, and for the northern inner channels, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, winds will be out of the north 15 knots. Central and southern inside waters, look for north to northwest breezes at about 10 knots. And then for Sunday, for the north coast, winds will be out of the northwest at 10 knots. South coast, northwest at 15. And Clarence Strait, northwesterlies at 10 knots. Stevens Passage, south at 10 knots. And southeast winds 15 knots for Lynn Canal. Prince William Sound, east winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Middleton Island, southeast winds 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the western North Gulf Coast. The Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay for easterly winds at 25 knots with seas at around 8 feet. Cook Inlet looking at a northeast breeze at 15 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. And for Sunday, swing the winds around to south-southwest, 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet. West winds coming down to 15 knots for Kamishak Bay, north at 20 for the Barren Islands, northeast 20 for the western North Gulf Coast, east winds 20 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast, light variable winds for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, variable to northeast winds at 20 knots, Saturday 5 to 8 foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, west winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 to 8 feet. Bristol Bay, southeast winds 15 knots. And for Sunday, Bristol Bay, southwest winds 15 knots. Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest at 15. And Kodiak Island, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 4 to 7 foot seas. For the Fox Islands, eastern Aleutians, west-southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 to 8 feet. Central Aleutians, south to southwesterlies at 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the western Aleutians, south winds 25 knots, seas as high as 8 feet. And for Sunday, western Aleutians, south to southwest winds 25 knots, continuing the small craft advisories there. Small craft advisories also for the central Aleutians, southerlies up to 25 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, south to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. For the southwest coast, looking at 10 knot winds tomorrow with 3 foot seas. Light variable winds for the northern Bering Sea and St. Matthew Island. Pribilofs, light southwest breeze at 10 knots. And St. Lawrence Island, southeast winds 15 knots with 4 foot seas. Norton Sound, east winds 15 knots. And for Sunday, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, light southwest breeze at 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet, and south-southwest winds at 20 knots for the southwest coast, with seas running 3 to 4 feet. Pribilof, south winds 20 knots, 6-foot seas, southeast 20 knots with 6-foot seas for St. Matthew Island. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light winds out of the north and northeast at roughly 10 knots or so. Eastern Arctic coast, east at 20 knots. Western Arctic coast, east winds 20 knots, seas and ice-free waters to 4 feet. And then from Cape Beaufort to Wales, look for southeast winds Saturday at 15 knots with seas at around 3 feet. And for Sunday, from Wales to Cape Thompson, light northwest breeze at 10 knots with slight seas, and Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast at 10 knots. Western Arctic coast, northeast winds 15 knots, seas in the ice-free waters at 3 feet. Central Arctic coast, east winds 15 knots, and east-northeast winds 10 to 15 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. For tonight again, Arctic coast, north slope, low clouds, fog in areas, some areas seeing some clearing. Line of persisting thunderstorms there along that trough axis, and low in the central interior from the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, eastern Alaska range northwestward to possibly the western Arctic coast. Weakening front pushes some rain inland across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Periods of rain continue for Bristol Bay, some of that sliding up into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, as well as southern Cook Inlet. Looks wet for Kodiak Island, a little breezy, and chance of rain for Homer. Increasing clouds over the remainder of the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet, are mostly cloudy skies, but drier up in the Susitna Valley, and dry with light winds over the Panhandle. Next front bringing rain into the western Aleutians, but that kind of washes out as another one comes in to replace it. The first one washes out there just west of the Pribilofs. Otherwise, periods of light rain, Kodiak Island, southwest interior, sunny, a little warmer now over northern Cook Inlet and the Susitna-Manuska valleys. And for Sunday, look for more clouds and more thunderstorm activity over interior Alaska, and chance of showers over the Panhandle, light rain, Kodiak Island, southwest interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.